everyone. My name is Jonathon Dornbush, and this is Podcast Beyond, episode 641 of IGN's weekly PlayStation show. And boy, do we have a lot of hot news for you from the end of last week, because nothing big has broken this week just yet. Thankfully, though, we have quite a bit to talk about, including a new fuzzy best friend we might all have in the next gen. But before we get to that, I'm joined this week by Brian Altano.
Hello.
Max Scoville.
Aloha, and a happy Tuesday to you, good sir.
And we're also joined by Lucy O'Brien. But Lucy, I noticed you're wearing a different shirt.
What is this? Hey, it's an elderly Irish woman t-shirt. It was such a thrill to get it because, like, I don't know about you guys, but any little difference in your day, these trying times is kind of thrilling. So when it arrived, it was like I felt it like a runner's high from it. But it's great. It's great. I love it. And thank you so much to everyone who has told me that they've bought it. To all the people who have asked for me to send one, because I know I promised I would last episode. I can only actually really feasibly send out two. So I'm sending them to a couple of Kiwis in New Zealand.
Rampant favoritism.
That is favoritism.
To be fair, they were not only Kiwis, but they were the first people to hit me up. So it was just a serendipitous, wonderful thing to happen.
Lucy,
I'm sure.
After the show, send me some of the people who send things your way.
Lucy, where can people get this shirt right now?
They can get it at the IGN store. The URL of which is
store.ign.com.
That's it. There's a lot of good stuff on there, so yeah, be sure to take a browse, because it's not just silly crap like this. I mean, not crap, like fun stuff like this. There's a lot of good stuff.
Content.
Silly quality content. That's it.
There's also some really serious formal wear you can put on for your. No, there isn't, and also we won't have to wear that stuff ever again, or at least for a long time. So don't worry about it. Go get an elderly Irishwoman t-shirt and rock it with pride.
Hell yeah.
Yes, please do. Of course, there's also Beyond shirts there that you can buy, as well as, in addition to all of the other IGN podcasts are represented on there as well. So you don't need to worry about wearing formal wear right now, but what you might want to worry about is how much your PS5 is going to cost you. And so let's jump in.
Beautiful segue.
Thank you.
That was really good, Jonathan.
Thank you. And I think what's really helping it is me thanking you all. Really brings in the continued transition. A Bloomberg report late last week broke, of course, after we had recorded the episode, and we got a little information essentially about what analysts and some insiders, some developers and everything are saying about, including possibly some people close to Sony itself, who are looking ahead at the PS5 launch. And the big takeaways that I want to get to are, one, that there might be fewer units available for the PS5 in its first year than the PS4 had. They're estimating, according to some of the people Bloomberg spoke to, 5 to 6 million units of the PS5 in the fiscal year that would end March 2021. The PS4 in that time period, for some perspective, sold over 7 million units in that 5-month period. The article goes on to speculate that the price could get in somewhere near the $499 to $549 area, and we'll touch on that in a bit for sure. Then the other big a point they made was essentially that, according to Bloomberg sources, the Sony promotional plans may have significantly changed due to COVID-19. Apparently, the production isn't the big issue there. Because of COVID, there are production issues because of the scarcity of components. But what the big issue that COVID apparently has caused is how Sony is going to essentially market this system and tell us to buy it and tell us why the games on it are going to be worth spending possibly $500 for. So I do want to start first with that price, because I do think that's one of the biggest topics that we'll be returning to until Sony eventually tells us the price. And as Lucy said before the show, given our luck, they'll probably announce it as soon as we finish recording. But what do you all think if the price ends up in the $499 to $549 price range, if that ends up being true?
That feels like something we've been anticipating for a while, especially the $499 area. $549, or really any price, any console price that has like a 49 on it, I've said this in the past, feels cheap and tacky. Like it feels like this is like a multi-million-dollar company that is passing the cost onto the consumer. I feel like when you have a 49 in there, if you don't throw in like at least an extra controller or a game or something like that, it's hard to sort of justify that price. It feels like a weird it's a weird number. So I wouldn't like to see this thing be $549.99. But $499 feels like the sweet spot. I still think that's too high for a large majority of people that have by and large equated console retail prices for $399 at the absolute max for years now. But things are getting more expensive, and we're heading into a bold new era of power with these systems. So I think people are going to have to kind of bite the bullet a little bit on that. But that said, with extremely limited supply constraints, I believe at the beginning, then this is going to be a luxury item for a select few people for a little while anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that price point. I agree with you, Brian. I feel like most people stuck to $399 being the max. I think one of the biggest things that could affect the price will be whatever Microsoft does. And I feel like we're going to probably see Microsoft announce price first just because of how bullish they've been this cycle. And I think if they come in somehow, I don't think the Series X would be, but if they came in at 400, I think Sony would need to do something to get closer to that price point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Microsoft is going to come in at 400, at least for what they've been promising so far, unless there is a top tier model and a lower tier model in terms of raw horsepower. I think that this is going to be a significant generational leap in terms of said raw power. I think this is the first time we're really going to see consoles kind of sort of stand side by side with PCs. And in terms of what PlayStation is doing as well with the haptic stuff and the 3D audio and all that sort of thing, like there's a lot going into it. And I think that the price really is I think people should expect it to be expensive. I think all of these consoles will be expensive. I think Nintendo will continue to be the sort of entry point for like someone who maybe doesn't earn, who can't afford that like ridiculously high price tag. But I think we're going to see, much higher price points this generation.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, echoing everything you guys both said, the 49 price point does seem weird. I'm totally with Brian. I wouldn't say cheap necessarily, just sort of, it's got like less pageantry to it. Like, I feel like you usually see 49 after a price. I don't know. I think that, luxury item is a key word here, especially as the economy just take a huge crap on itself. I think a lot of people are going to be struggling to grab this. And at the same time, we've talked about this before. The tail end of this generation is phenomenal. We had sort of half measures with the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. So I think a lot of people, especially people who are early adopters of newer hardware with those sort of half measures, probably don't feel as much pressure to jump on this bandwagon for this latest generation.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty amazing to be playing Final Fantasy VII right now and talking about the raw power of the next gen consoles, because I'm so happy with how beautiful that game looks and what our current consoles can actually do. I totally echo what you're saying. Like, I think that there's going to be less of a that kind of itch to scratch to get the new consoles, at least immediately.
I think you need to essentially line up a launch lineup of at least one or more killer apps that are completely exclusive to the PlayStation 5. That, and you have to start pricing individual pieces of it to help the consumer justify what will inevitably be a sting of a price point. If they say to us that the new controllers are $89.99 or $99.99 and the system is 500, then you're like, well, I guess the console is really only 400. Like, once you start piecemealing stuff like this, because that's how they've really done it in the past, is you're able to sort of compartmentalize what that list looks like in your head. They throw in a few months of PlayStation Plus or a free game or something like that. I do really think that like the pack-in game being a digital thing is something that both of these manufacturers need to do this time around to really help offset the costs here of of what's inevitably going to be like a very expensive day one console. And Lucy, to what you said earlier, I think I do foresee Microsoft coming in with one SKU that's $400, and that's going to be their big sort of like battle axe to be like,
Mhm.
we can get people in the door on next gen the cheapest way possible, and I don't really see Sony doing that. But
Yeah, no, neither. And the other thing to note is like we're talking specifically about the North American price here, and there's a big wide world out there. And when I was growing up in New Zealand, and I spent the last 8 years in Australia, and obviously everything is much higher. Like the consoles on paper, it's all relative, but the US dollar is so much, it packs so much more power than the Australian dollar, and I do
mhm.
worry what it's going to be like for Antipodeans, for example, who are gonna, for us it may be whatever, but like the PlayStation 3 launched in Australia for 999, and it's just like I am
Mm.
very, and with the economy being what it is, like the
Yeah.
mind kind of boggles.
Also, like, we look at this sort of this last console generation was really, we got the sort of the beginnings of Netflix and streaming apps on last gen, but it felt like it really kind of kicked with PS4 and Xbox One. It was really people using these systems for aside from just games as like a full blown entertainment center. And I feel like that's like you don't need a cutting edge hardware to watch Netflix, and
Yeah.
beyond that, like we don't have any games to go on. So that's going to be another thing. Like there's also these games that people completely invested in, which it feels less like it's less of like a new game that comes out like a cutting edge thing, and more like kind of an ecosystem that you want to be a part of. Like you see this any of the sort of games as a service, especially stuff like Fortnite or Warzone or Apex or Valorant, or like anything where it's like it's kind of just an ongoing thing that you can be part of. And the fact that that's made available for existing hardware is kind of it kind of lowers the barrier of entry. And like the luxury angle here is something to really to keep in mind, because if you don't have to shell out $549 for a new box, then what's the draw there?
Yeah. Also, if games have been positioned as such a sort of a place for community over the last few years, and I think with PlayStation, that's been such a big part of it. Um, Same with Xbox, obviously. But if your friends can't afford to get a PS5, like maybe you hold back a little bit too. We're sort of considering this in the grand scheme of console launches that we've seen in the past, which historically, had a few less roadblocks in front of them as 2020 has provided literally every aspect of the world.
A little bit.
But I could foresee like a global launch initiative being sort of staggered here. Instead of us sort of predicting that every single console will launch in every region at the same time, which I think best laid plans, both manufacturers want to do right now. The reality is far different than that. With supply chains being constrained right now, with pandemic crisis happening all over the place, economic collapse happening everywhere. I do foresee some regions getting it day and date, and I see others getting it months later, or if not weeks later. So it's going to be pretty hard to track for a little while. So I don't think you're going to have that big sort of like, it's here. This is the launch day. This is the launch window. The whole world is celebrating in the same PlayStation 5 party. Like it's going to be staggered, and there's going to be a lot of factors. That's at least what I'm predicting.
It'll be interesting to see because Sony has made a really big deal about becoming a more globally focused company over the last even few months, with the org changes and with the different shifts in how they're operating. That seems to be a big thing they are pushing for. But obviously, yeah, we have no idea what things are going to look like months from now. Phil Spencer went on Podcast Unlocked a few weeks ago and talked about how they want to do that global launch too, because he sees firsthand what it's like to go to Japan and see how the Xbox One fares there. And he doesn't want to ever have a delay like that again. But there
Right.
might be things that end up being out of these companies' hands. I do want to move a little more into this topic, though, in terms of how Sony is going to convince us to buy this thing. Because right now we are looking at possibly a luxury priced item with a limited supply. So I think the limited supply kind of goes hand in hand with the price, where it's probably a good thing for them because they're not going to have probably millions of units sitting in warehouses, just waiting to be bought because they're going to have supply restraints. But if Sony, isn't going to be at conventions, we knew they weren't going to be at E3, but now Gamescom is digital only. We know that stores and public places are probably going to be reticent to have people en masse or even be legally allowed to have people en masse in the months to come. So Sony needs to figure out a way to convince people to buy this. How do you think they do that?
Launch the console exclusively in Georgia. No, what were you gonna say, Lucy? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think that PlayStation might have more of an uphill climb in this regard than Xbox. Considering when we're going back to that raw horsepower, if you're just going to show people how good the graphics look, you can do that over like a PlayStation, little mini direct or whatever. I keep forgetting the name. It's like I've got a weird brain. State of play. You can do that. You can do that in the state of play, but you can't really convey how that 3D sound works and how the controller feels, because those are such selling points for this machine. It's not just about the graphics, it's about the whole package and how it's going to be different to play, how it feels different to play. It's different from just being able to sort of put an amazing piece of gameplay that we can all watch and just go ooh and ah. There's a lot more convincing that Sony needs to do, whereas Microsoft can just be like, and here's blah de blah running in 100K, and we're all just going to go and everyone's going to go crazy. So I think PlayStation has more of an uphill battle in this regard. I still think games are going to look fantastic on the PlayStation 5. I have no doubt of that. But yeah, in terms of all the other features that they're trying to sell us, I think it's going to be harder with people
totally right.
not being able to hold it.
This is a bad time to be trying to push haptics, because they specifically require you to touch a thing, which is something that nobody really wants when there's invisible slime on everything that might kill you, Not to get dark or anything.
No. I mean, this is all factoring in the stuff we're talking about. I think that, like, fundamentally, this is something we've said for a very long time in the show. I think that what needs to happen is there needs to be sort of a road that consumers can offload their current gen hardware and immediately upgrade to next gen hardware at a reduced cost for them. And the messaging that needs to be coming from Microsoft and Sony right now is, your old thing was great. It served you for a long time. The new thing will replace it in functionality entirely and also improve upon it vastly in ways you can't imagine. And to help initiate and ease that transition, bring your old thing in, dump it off, leave it in a garbage bag on in front of GameStop, and we'll give you a brand new PlayStation 5. Like, if you can trade in your PS4 and get $200 or $250 off of these new systems or something like that. Or even the other thing we've talked about, which is sort of the layaway plan, right? Like you pay $30 a month and you get a PlayStation 5 and PlayStation Plus for 3 or 4 years, and you're paying that off until you own the console, essentially. I mean, that's the way people handle mobile devices right now. Like, I think that's what needs to happen. You need to basically tell me, like, your PlayStation 4 is awesome, it's getting a ton of games, but all those games will work day one on PS5, and you can bring your PS4 in and transfer everything over on the spot, and here you go home with your brand new PS5. Don't worry about your old system anymore. That has to happen, because I think that's the most important bridge right now that needs to be crossed.
I agree, and I obviously it's a hard infrastructure thing to figure out of how to be able to get people en masse to do that. But look at last year's Black Friday deals. You could get a PS4 with Spider-Man, God of War, and The Last of Us Remastered for $200. Right. Assuming that deal is back, you could sell that again this year, if not for even cheaper or with more games. For someone who doesn't really care about having the prettiest thing, that's a much better deal than saying, well, I should buy the new thing because it's the new thing. They're going to need to be able to convince a lot of players why it's worth upgrading, especially as we've all been alluding, this year is so packed with good games we're still going to be playing in November.
Right. Which doesn't really seem to be the case on the Xbox side, at least in terms of massive exclusives that are coming out in its last year. And so they can comfortably do a essentially permanent price drop on all of their hardware right now. And it's just going to exist to offload existing stuff that's already on shelf. Whereas Sony doing that could sort of shoot themselves in the foot in terms of competing with themselves in next gen. You're completely right. If they have an insane $200 PS4 Pro that has 3 games built in on Black Friday, and that's going up against a $500 console that doesn't ship with a game, and frankly may not have like a killer app exclusive within its first launch window, then I think the average consumer is going to go with the former.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they end up pitching all of this stuff. We were talking about state of plays a little earlier, and Brian, you and I talked about this on News Games and More yesterday as we're recording, I think. And there hasn't been one in 2020 yet. Like, they have not done a proper showcase in any way. They did like almost a mini state of play on the PlayStation blog, but that was indie focused games. They haven't really done anything first party or next gen beyond these random drops like the DualSense. So that feels like that's what we're going to be getting for the time being. Like, they're going to put these things out when they feel they need to or have to, which is a weird strategy in my book. But
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting any sort of traditional announcements from really anyone this year. With all the major events being canceled, I think people are going to start to sort of create their own timelines for how they want to get their news and their stories out. And so we always said, like, Microsoft's going to have their press conference at E3, and then Sony's going to probably do something at night, or like the next week or something like that. But everything's off the table with that right now. So yeah, we've said this before, their messaging in 2020 has been bizarre, to say the best. Like, it's been very strange. So I hope we can all look back on this era and be like, that was weird, but ultimately it didn't matter because we're really happy with the PS5. Can't wait to play these launch games. But the road to this thing so far has been cumbersome at best, I would say.
I think one thing's for certain, though. Whenever they do have something huge to announce, it will happen immediately 20 minutes after we've just recorded an episode of this show.
Yeah,
exactly. And I can't
It's
wait
very true.
for that to be true a year from now when we're talking about PS5 game announcements while we're playing our PS5s.
Yeah.
It's a little weird to think a year from now that first 5-month period that they're looking at possibly limited sales in is going to be over by now. That's kind of the trajectory we're heading, but there's still so much to figure out, and hopefully we'll find that out in the months to come. One way Sony might tell us about how things work in the future, given a new patent at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, is a tiny fuzzy little robot friend who will sit with you and play games on the couch and be your PlayStation buddy. This patent came out of nowhere. I don't know what to say about it because it seems insane, but Sony has patented an autonomous robotic gaming companion that sympathizes with the user and reacts to their emotions during gameplay. A couple things I want to highlight about it. This patent, which again, not an official product yet, may never see the light of day, may just be an idea Herman had in a boardroom, and he decided to have it patented just in case. Phil was on the line too. Anyway, this thing has no mouth, but a pair of endearing eyes and cute boots.
It has no mouth, but it must scream.
Yes.
I'm so curious, even as a patent, where like we're not. It may just be nothing. It may just be a as you said, just an idea. But like, I don't get so every time you die in a video game, say you're playing Bloodborne, right? And you die a whole bunch. Is this little guy sitting next to you going to be like every time? Because that would get extremely annoying.
Apparently, he might not even be on the couch with you because apparently it's supposed to be autonomous enough to the point where it could choose to sit beside you on the sofa of its own accord. So maybe it gets up to take a walk every now and then too.
Maybe you get too angry playing Bloodborne and it just leaves, and it's like, I don't want to be in the room with you, and just. I mean, I already have one of those. Like, I have my dog. Like, when I'm starting screaming too much at some like blood-starved animal, and I just start yelling at the TV, he gets up and leaves, and I'm like, well, that's some autonomy.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the reason a lot of this stuff gets pitched and ends up being popular is not necessarily for like people living in America, but it's for people living in small apartments in Japan. That's why everything from like Tamagotchi to Nintendogs to the Sony Aibo and a bunch of other stuff. Like it's why they have there's dog cafes all over the place in Japan because people want some hands-on time with a puppy and they can't do it in their apartment. So, or an owl, because you have that option as well. So I could see this doing well over there.
We also talked about, I think this is on Up at Noon a million years ago, but there's like Hasbro makes like $150 robot cat that is for old people. They want that companionship. And I feel like we're looking at this as like, this is targeting, hot young gamers like ourselves who want the cutting edge experience and the friendship that won't ever quit or whatever. But this could just as easily be the elderly to be like, here's a companion.
But also, like, let's not forget. Oh God, I mean, if this ever came to, it would be great if this thing existed right now. Because think about all the people who are isolating by themselves. I mean, shout out to you guys, whoever's listening, who is currently doing that. Because I can't imagine how, that could be really hard at times. And I can imagine that a little robot friend who empathizes with you is a very enticing prospect.
I mean,
Yeah,
I've seen. Oh, are we going to say, Jonathan?
I just that there is sort of a there is a positive aspect to it. It is just such a weird, like, out of the blue idea. But yeah, the idea that it could be essentially a gaming partner you might not be able to have otherwise. They gave an example of it being able to essentially be the thing that's controlling the opponent team in a game of a baseball game, and presumably it would react to you either scoring against it or it scoring against you, and you feel like you have a little bit more than just whatever is on screen.
Yeah, I really love that. Honestly, like it's creepy and weird, but it's also really fun. And if you're gonna play against the computer in a video game anyway, might as well have like a smack talking dog man sitting next to you. Like, Lucy, to what you were saying, like I was reading about all these basically animal shelters are like their cages are like empty for the first time in a
So
long time.
good.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And people are home and they're adopting, and there are also trucks that are basically delivering these shelter animals to people's houses so they can meet them for the first time and then bring them in. Yeah, I think something like this would be awesome right now for people who, I don't know, don't want an animal to poop in their house, but also like want like a little small friend to be on the couch with them.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about robots is they don't leave their feces anywhere. They just don't have that even.
Yeah, and
Not
hopefully
yet.
they don't. Yeah, we'll see. The patent interestingly notes that, quote, it is expected that the user's affinity with the robot is increased and motivation for playing a game is enhanced by the robot viewing the gameplay next to the user and being pleased or sad together. Further, regarding not only the game, but also a movie, a television program, or the like, it is expected that the user may enjoy content more by viewing the content with the robots as compared to the case of viewing it alone. And yeah, Lucy, as you were saying, this thing should come out right now. Like, this would be a perfect thing for a lot of people to have right now.
Yeah.
Goddamn robots, Sony. Let us have a robot friend. What would improve my enjoyment of watching a movie? I had a robot who would just like, whenever I just start looking at my phone, he would just like look at me really angrily and like wouldn't say anything because he has no mouth, but he would just stare at me like passive aggressively, and I'd be like, sorry, I'll put my phone away, we can watch the movie.
Oh yeah, you can see the disappointment in his eyes. Yes.
He just like pauses it and like stares at me expectantly, like, you done? You done on Instagram, you asshole?
So the robot is really just meant to make us appreciate art.
Oh, it's a lovely way of putting it.
What if this thing comes to market and is actually a real thing we may end up buying? I hope it personally just looks like a tiny little astrobot that hangs out next to you. What do you think they should call it?
God, this is tough.
I think it should be called something creepy. I mean, I'm really, for me, I'm really only into this idea if it turns creepy. I want these things to be walking around at night when you're asleep. Like, I want, them to like be scuttling around in the cutlery drawer, fiddling for a knife. That's what I want. So I want it to have like a suitably creepy name, like, like Clyde, or like.
I was thinking something that sounds like a Corwin or like a Delvin, or like it's like a little bit like, it sounds like a familiar name, but it's like slightly.
Yeah, it's slightly off.
Yeah, Godwin.
I want it to be called Godwin.
What if instead of like the
God complex so quickly?
Instead of like the Sony Walkman, it was like the Sony Houseman, and it was just like a small man that lived in your home. Apartman.
Apartman.
Oh God. Apartman. Apartman. He brings you together.
Introducing the Sony Weeaboo.
It just fights with you about who's best girl in Persona.
Corwin, the apartment.
Yeah, this. as we mentioned at the top of this isn't a thing we know is going to actually ever come to market. Companies, including Sony, patent things all the time, so we may never see a little Sony helper robot, but it's definitely a possibility. And I like this conversation kind of convinced me I'd probably buy one just to see how it worked until it killed me.
Mhm.
Yes.
Moving on from that, though, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the recent news from this week because a lot of stuff happened. Most recently, the MPD results from earlier this morning. As we're recording, no surprise that the Switch and Animal Crossing were far and away the winners when it came to NPD this month. That's all any of us can talk about, including on the show, so it seems only fair that that would happen. But a few notable games from the PlayStation side of things did crack into the top 10 for March, including MLB The Show 20 in number 3, and that was actually the 5th best-selling game of 2020 in that month, and the fastest-selling MLB The Show game in franchise history. So obviously, people are still loving MLB The Show, and with good cause, because that studio does great work. Persona 5 Royal, which is currently a PS4 exclusive, was number 7 on the list. And then Neo 2 debuted at 11 on the list. So a pretty good month for PlayStation exclusive games. Modern Warfare was number 2 and is currently still the best selling game of 2020, proving that every time someone says, who buys Call of Duty? A lot of people still do.
Everyone, yeah. I want to give a shout out to GTA 5 for finally making the top 10. That was a big move for those guys.
I think that this Grand Theft Auto series might be here to stay. I think it's finally starting to get its foot in the door, and it's going to be might be a hit.
Yep.
Hopefully one day they decide to make another. But whenever that day comes, we don't know, it'll be too soon, but we do know that Streets of Rage 4 is getting released on April 30th for PS4 and all the other SKUs. Have you guys followed this at all? Were you Streets of Rage fans?
Yes.
Are you excited for this one? Because it's an interesting nostalgia play to me.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm a huge fan of like old school arcade beat 'em ups. Always have been. And so I'm very excited for this one. Streets of Rage was always a weird series for me. I definitely collected them and I played them, but I was more of like a River City Ransom Double Dragon guy, Final Fight and all that. And then obviously, Ninja Turtles, X-Men, The Simpsons. Those are some of my favorite like kind of goofy beat 'em ups of all time. But Streets of Rage is one of those games that like it you look at the box art and you're like, wow, this is tough and serious. And then you get in there and you're like, there's a kangaroo with roller skates and you just kicked the girl. Like it's very dumb, but in the best way possible. It's triumphantly 90s, which I totally dig. So I'm really interested to see where the new one goes. The beat 'em up genre is interesting because it's I feel like the most modern attempts at it have missed a lot of what makes it fun. Like they either oversimplify it, which when you're not 5 years old, like pumping quarters into an arcade, it's kind of boring. Or they sort of like over convolute it and they make the levels too long and they add like absurd like combat systems and like over the top RPG elements. And I think that like it's very tough to find that perfect balance. So I hope this finds it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I dig what they're doing with the art, and I appreciate that. It seems like they're very much trying to celebrate the whole franchise. Like this isn't a thing that's trying to revolutionize what people love. They're bring it all into modern day and in a new sleek looking package. Hopefully, it's a lot of fun to play. We also learned that good news for Barrett Courtney, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, the longest goddamn game name in history that I hate having to type out in stories, has been revealed to be coming out on June 23rd.
A big one with our audience. So, yeah, really surprised. I mean, maybe it's not so surprising, but yeah, like I was surprised that it's such a big game with our audience.
Our audience loves to rehydrate bikini bottoms, so this has been well documented.
Brian!
It's in the title of the game.
Brian!
That's the title of the game.
They know what they're doing.
Don't blame me. I don't work for them. I don't work for SpongeBob. I don't make that name up.
If you are excited about SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, chances are we'll be talking about it a little bit in June when it does come out. If you want us to have Barrett Courtney on the show when that game comes out, tweet at SadBoyBarrett with 2 T's, not 1 T like an FF7, 2 T's. Tweet at him and ask him if he will come on Beyond to talk Bikini Bottom Rehydrated.
And counterpoint, if you're opposed to having Barrett come on, go to change.org and sign my petition, which is just do not ever allow Barrett to come on the show. We've got over 20,000 signatures already, so I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Impressive. Wow. People.
Some good hustling, Max.
Yeah. I get why Barrett is such a sad boy.
Yeah.
Speaking of boys yelling yippee about things, though, that was position. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is coming out on May 12th for PS4. We talked about this on News Games and More back last week. I'm excited. Max is excited. Brian, are you excited for this?
I'm excited at the idea of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same. I like the
Yeah.
idea more than I like the actual. Like, I know that I won't be touching this game, but I like that it exists.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have that option there. Whether or not I'll actually like put some time into it is a very different thing. I went on like a big like Star Wars movie rewatch last year, and found a lot that I actually really liked about Phantom Menace. But the video games are kind of a different story.
I think that really does say a lot about how bad everything is, that we're all like, we were too hard on you, the Phantom Menace. You're okay. You're all right then.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm with you on that. It's got a lot of cool stuff, including the pod race.
Which is what we're getting now. I'm excited to revisit it on some other shows. I think it is a fun game, but probably not a great one. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay to dive in and see how a few races go. And last but not least, on the release date front, we learned about Crysis Remastered officially being announced for PS4 in addition to PC, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch. It's going to be coming soon, but we don't have too much else beyond that. I think I'm going to double check if there's a proper release date. But that's being co-developed by Saber Interactive, who did the Witcher Switch port, NBA Playgrounds, and a host of other games and ports as well. I never played Crysis back in the day, so I don't know if I'll step into this one, but obviously it's kind of very well known as being the like PC melting game for a long time.
Yeah, I played Crysis 2, but I never played the original. I think I'll jump in just to take a look, just so I can say that I played it and, get some sort of education around it. Like, there are people who, stand by that game as one of the greats.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it holds up, especially as the shooter genre has changed so much with the introduction of battle royales and Doom returning in a lot of different ways that genre. Last but not least, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm mostly excited for the graphic comparison videos that will show the PS4 Pro version versus like high-end PC version versus the Switch version. That's going to be, that's going to be super fun to watch.
Yeah. I want to see those versus the original game too.
Yeah.
That should be really interesting.
Just really hammer at home,
Exactly. Last but not least, a little bit of weird news that popped up yesterday. You guys remember that game Wild, the PS4 exclusive Wild from Michel Ancel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The website for it was surprisingly updated with new concept art images over the last few weeks. No one's exactly sure the exact date. And there's no other update on the site. There's no information saying like coming soon, can't wait to show you this game again. Nothing like that. It's just some new concept art that wasn't on that website before.
Some dude is probably like, well, not really doing much else. I'm just sitting here at home. Might as well upload some screenies.
Yeah. I mean, I love that that's it when you frame it within the context of everything that's going on there, that it's new concept art revealed for upcoming video. But counterpoint, somebody posted JPEGs of a caveman on a website. Like, I get that they're making that game, I think, but it's also at this point, it's like, well, is it still in the works? Like, it's sort of kind of cart before the horse to drop some concept after so much radio silence.
Yeah, that game was announced in 2014, and we had a hands-on preview of it at Paris Games Week 2015, but it has essentially been silent since then.
So 6 years.
Yeah. And I imagine if this game is happening, it will move to PS5 at this point. Like, there's no reason to try to push this out on the PS4, but it's a weird one. It's always been one of those like vaporware sort of things of like, will this ever come to fruition, or will it just be a forgotten title that Michel Ancel and Sony will pretend never existed in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
But I like seeing signs of life in it. I think it looked pretty cool at first, but who knows where that game will actually go from here. But the last bit of news stuff that I want to talk about is sort of a general thing we've touched on here on the show a few times. There have been like 7,000 leaks every other day on Reddit and Reset Era and other websites that we don't go to. And everyone is trying to show you every new game that you didn't know existed or is existing, and they have amazing detailed info from their friend who works for a friend at a warehouse who knows a guy at Sony. And I kind of want to talk about these because I saw some big ones popping up, including Spider-Man and Starfield have been starting to pop up as sort of just like if you're not hearing anything official from either the companies themselves, from people with trusted sourcing who have reported on these things in and out, it's probably not best to assume someone taking a like 240p off-screen screenshot is telling you the truth about a thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Counterpoint. Here's the thing: a lot of people don't know is that every video game developer on Earth has the worst phone from 25 years ago, and they're only allowed to take like sideways leaky pictures like that. No, this is something that happens every year leading up to new consoles. But I think now the fact that most of the world is home and bored, it's gonna get so much worse, so much worse, and I can't wait. We actually we did an entire NVC episode back in the day on that 3D printed fake Nintendo Switch that was like an oval. It looked like a flat football, and it had like some Zelda screenshot on it. And we went from being horrified to being like, maybe the screen is underneath the thumbstick and you can use it to access the horse. And we did like a whole episode about it.
Oh man.
And like the next day, he was like, "I was lying, you idiots." And we were like, "Ah, shoot."
I mean, like, flip side, sometimes this stuff winds up being legit, and then we cover it accordingly, and then it turns out it's real, and it's I don't know.
I mean, chances are, if it's a Ubisoft leak, it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, track record wise for company UB game, I think we have catalogs that literally every single mainline Assassin's Creed game has been leaked, like including the first one.
I'm excited to see what format the leak comes in, because it's always something weird, like a fridge magnet or like a promotional bathrobe that they give out, and you're like,
it was a keychain. It was a keychain one year.
A lot of times too, it's a guy who has he brought basically a 42-inch tablet onto an airplane, and he's just holding it up like this, and it says like Assassin's Creed Odyssey on it. But without airplanes and trains and other various forms of public transportation to openly leak your big project that is taking 170,000 worldwide employees to create in unison, how will people be able to leak these news? I think we have to get back to keychains and hats, slinkies.
I think my favorite was always like WB leaks it was always a photo of a banner they hung up at E3.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it would be like you really dropped the ball at the bottom of the ninth there, where it's like, I didn't know Injustice 2 was going to be a thing until I walked inside this room and looked up, and it was like, oh, there it is. Dude, you just really.
My favorite ever is we used to always, and this is a sneaky trick if you're starting a video game website and you want a lot of clicks, and not this year, it won't work for you, but every other year during E3, you can basically look up like geotags for anybody building and uploading any photos around the convention center in downtown Los Angeles. And a couple years ago, there was this like Teamster construction worker guy that took a picture of himself in front of or he took a picture of just like a room. He's like, "Look at these poles I built; they're great." And on one of them, it just said like Super Mario Maker available soon. It hadn't been revealed yet, and so he was just like, "I'm super proud of the way I built these poles. That's a good pole. It's gonna hold up the whole convention center. It can be great." And it just had a picture of an unreleased Nintendo game on it, and we were like, "Holy crap, this is awesome!"
I think my favorite. There was the secret like Tony Hawk 5 event or something, and a caterer was like, huge honor to cater to Tony Hawk himself, and it was like just in front of a half pipe with like a giant logo on it. We were like, oh, well, there's that.
No, didn't he put a bunch of like ornate dining tables in the middle of a half pipe with like candles on them?
Yeah. So if you see that happen, that's one thing, but given the proliferation of people, one, being at home and having nothing to do, two, having a lot of access to Photoshop and video editing and deep fakes now, probably some stuff that you're going to see that's not true. That doesn't mean to say that every leak out there doesn't have possibly some kernel of truth to it. But I think definitely don't get yourself too overexcited, especially as Brian was pointing to. People taking off-screen photos with a Motorola Razr from 2006, they don't need to do that. They can just screenshot their screen if it's on a Zoom call. That's how you do it.
You know, a really good way to circumvent this would be for Sony to put a little bit of elbow grease into like a presentation that looked above and beyond just a JPEG on a blog or the Mystery Science Theater Mark Cerny thing that could be faked by like a child. Like I feel like if they went out and they made like an actual full-on presentation, that would circumvent a lot of this stuff, because then they could own the message instead of us sitting here waiting for, you know, angry kids who are home for the summer to lie to us.
Actually, speaking of lying to people, I want to give a quick shout out to our 2 April Fools videos that we were not allowed to put up until 4/20. A long story reasons, but yeah, we spent months working on April Fool's gags that were then kind of deemed like maybe people weren't in the best mood for April Fool's jokes. We put them up on 4/20. One is a teaser trailer for The Mandalorian Season 2, which Brian and I worked on a bunch, and then the other is the X Series XXL, which is an incredible reveal trailer of the world's largest video game console. And we have since revealed that those are not real, and we're sorry, and please don't be so mad at us for joking on the computer. We're bored.
I still fondly remember the presentation show pitch meeting for the XXL. I'm glad
I still have those photos. I should post those Photoshops today. That was really fun.
Yeah, you should, because they were very funny.
And you guys did, Max, I know you did a prop work and everything for the Mandalorian. And all that stuff looks so good.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Max, we're at the point of quarantine where we need your advice on like miniature painting.
You want to do hobbies?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can talk about that
later.
Okay.
Well, as we all figure out hobbies, the show, we're running a little short on time. Very quickly, wanted to ask, are you guys playing anything different from last week? Anything sticking out to you that you've been playing, or is it about same right now?
About the same.
I've been playing a lot of Skate 3 for literally no reason. I got it for $5 on Xbox for 360, and I've been playing that and doing some attempted 360 as the most naked and most heavy set character I could possibly make, and it's the closest I could get to playing a CKY video game, and I've been like laughing uncontrollably, and also I'm really bad at that game, so
it gets tough. Yeah. Lucy, what about you?
Still Final Fantasy VII. I've come to the conclusion that it truly is, and you know, I know that this is a common sentiment, but it is the horniest game I've played in a severely long time. Everyone in that game is so thirsty for everyone else. It's just like it's not even innuendo. It's just like it's explicitly just so horny. And I love it. Adoring it.
That is the horniest game I've played till since Persona 5, the original, a couple years back, and Final Fantasy VII's thirst makes that game look like it's never had water in its life. Like,
counterpoint, I feel like every character in FF7 is so aggressively over-designed and over-styled to the point that you'll encounter actual children who are wearing like eyeliner and a rouge and like false eyelashes, and you're all right, toddlers and tiaras, pump the brake.
Everyone in that game has just been like rouged up as hell. You know what I mean? Just so much powder on it.
I'm pretty sure Cloud is just waxed. Like if you look at his armpits, there's just nothing.
Oh no, he's a smooth boy.
Oh yeah. He's also a punk ass, as that game rightly calls out. But we'll probably talk about that a little bit more in detail. People have asked. We do want to do a spoiler cast for it. Obviously, some people are still working their way through it, but that is something we want to do. If you have beaten it and you have thoughts about it that you might want us to read on the show, write into beyond at IGN.com. Put the subject line FF7 Remake so we know what it's about. And when we get to that show, we'll let you know and hopefully be able to include some of your thoughts on that game. But otherwise, that pretty much wraps us up for episode 641 of Podcast Beyond. Thank you, Max, Lucy, and Brian for joining me for this episode. Thank you to Red, our producer. when we're not doing the show, which is weekly at Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific at beyond.ign.com, youtube.com/IGNBeyond, and your favorite podcast services. We're, of course, at IGN.com, youtube.com/IGN, and on Twitter, I'm at JM Dornbush. Lucy is at Luce O'Brien. Max is at Max Scoville, and Brian is at Agent Bizzle. You can catch us, and I've got to go catch this train going by my window. So thank you so much for listening and or watching to this episode. And as always, we hope you're safe, we hope you're well, and beyond.
Beyond.
Beyond.